3 different times during the 70s. Each time they turned us down. And the way they would do it, they'd say, "Oh, you guys, just one more thing." And each time one of the specialties would come up with just one more thing. Then we had to go back and revamp the whole program. And after 3 rejections, we were getting pretty tired of it. So in 1979, we finally went to a meeting with 7 different specialty boards there who formed the American Board of Medical Specialties. And the 7 specialties were looking us over. And Dr. McLean got up, and there was a chalkboard behind him. He talked to the surgeon and said, "How many years do you think a guy needs in surgery to be an emergency resident?" "Well, at least 2 years in surgery." And the internist said, "Well, he needs 2 years of training in internal medicine." And the obstetrician said, "He needs at least a year of OB-GYN." Pediatrician said, "He needs at least a year in pediatrics." Dr. McLean turned to this chalkboard and he said, "Now let me see. The surgeons say he needs 2 years. Internists say he needs 2 years. OB-GYN says he needs a year." And if he got through, the 7 specialties had decided, if you want to be an emergency resident, you need to have 13 years of training. Well, that broke the ice, and all of a sudden they thought, we're being a little bit harsh on these guys. Maybe we better realize the fact that they do have a place as a specialty board. And that's when we got our approval. And I think Dr. McLean and his chalkboard had a lot to do with it. But my personal highlights in the 70s were quite a problem. I ran the emergency department at St. Joe's after Dr. Idison's heart attack. And in the summer of '75, Dr. Fink resigned and went to Florida Keys. He'd had enough. And Dr. Idison quit because he was afraid it was too stressful after his heart attack to keep doing this. And we had picked up 2 other part-time guys, Dr. Scoble, Dr. Alford, from Plymouth, Michigan. Dr. Scoble was the oldest guy, and he kept telling me, "Quit riding your motorcycle, quit taking your kids hiking up in the mountains in Colorado." He said, "You're going to fall down, you're going to get hurt. Quit scuba diving." And he was riding his bicycle with his wife in Plymouth, Michigan one day, hit the curb, fell over, broke his hip, and developed, he didn't even know he was diabetic, but developed all sorts of complications, died in the hospital, never got out from the broken hip. So now I've lost 3 of my partners. And then Dr. Alford said, "I'm going back to Plymouth and practice, family practice again." Now I have no partners. The sisters came down and they said, "Well, you can stay as the head of the emergency department, but you're going to have to recruit a new group." And I said, "I think I'll just kind of go back to greener pastures." And I thought, well, I'll go back into family practice and start to look around the country to do this. In the meantime, Dr. John McCabe and Dr. Greg Henry, whom you may have heard of also, because he's done an awful lot with risk management and that sort of thing, and has a business actually, and a medical insurance company that he started and all this. He was my resident. He worked under me. At one time, Dr. Fink, to backtrack to him, we were standing there, and Greg came down the hall, Greg Henry, and of course, the new resident was thinking of all these things that might be, like the old adage, and if you hear hoofbeats, think of a horse, not a zebra. Well, Greg came down the hall. He's kind of a loquacious guy, as you well know. And he said, "I think it could be this, could be this, could be this, could be this." And George was trying to tell him what was really happening to the patient at the time. But Greg had a lot of good ideas about it, but they were all a little bit far-fetched at the time. Since then, he's become a fantastic doctor and a fantastic administrator in emergency medicine. But George said, "Young man, you're talking when you should be listening." And when we got the national organization for him, Greg was one of the guys who helped do a lot of the initial questions. He and Ron Crome and Judy Tintinelli, who did a lot of the initial questions. And 100 people were going to do a little test exam so that we could show the ABMS that we really had something going. We had a test and everything else. And so they formulated that, and Greg was telling us all about it at the meeting. So I went up after the meeting, and I said, "Greg, you've come a long ways." I said, I'm sitting out in the audience, and I walked up to the podium, and I said, "We've really come a long ways, Greg, because now you're talking, and I'm listening." So he really did a lot, and they got the thing organized, took the test, and that's how we got the whole idea of testing started. What I did was just kind of roam around looking at various family practices deciding whether or not I would stay in emergency or not. And I attended one last ACEP meeting in Vail. I had an offer from the newly forming medical school in Marshall to go to be the head of their family practice program. I said, I haven't done anything academic in 20 years. They said, well, you understand these West Virginia people. If we bring somebody here from Harvard to head the program, and some guy walks in and says, I got this rising here in my ear and it's unpeeled, it means they're not going to understand. It means he's got an abscess that's ruptured. And so, Southern West Virginia is a different place. And I thought, well, I can't go back to Marshall because Mom and Dad still live there, and after about 3 days there, you know, with your mom and dad, you're just a kid again. Huh? This is going to throw me back quite a way. So I started looking around and was going to give up emergency medicine. We got to Vail skiing at a medical meeting. We did things besides go to the meeting, and crashed into another guy who was looking for an emergency doctor in Texas. So I went down there, which was totally different. A community hospital, and we had no teaching facilities. We had to make floor calls. There were only 2 of us down there, 48-hour shifts, and that was not acceptable to the board attorneys who would say, Doctor, you've been working 47 hours when you took care of this patient. Do you think you were at full faculties? So we can't keep doing this. We had no house staff and no in-house specialists of any kind. So it was a totally different environment than I was used to in an academic situation. And meanwhile, on the national scene, we had the ABM exam going. We got our helicopter service going, and we were really finally beginning to get some recognition. Dr. Ron Stewart up at the University of Pittsburgh did a whole lot with emergency medical services. And Jacksonville, Florida, set up some of the first telemetry. Because we had no communication. We didn't know what the ambulance was bringing in. We had no communication with it. We thought, well, this got to be better. And they were able to send EKGs ahead and all this sort of thing. So at that point, we had a helicopter in Beaumont where I was practicing, affiliated with Red Duke's Memorial Permanent program. I'll tell you one interesting story from there. I'm getting near the end of my time. And at that point, my wife had always wanted to experience a helicopter ride. We had gone out on just a PR mission, not with a patient aboard, to show a little town in Texas where to set up their pad, their windsock, their lights, so that we could land our helicopter and take the patient back to higher level facility they had in the little town. So, and on the way back, it was going to go right over my house. So I called ahead to my wife and said, you know, if you go to the practice range of the golf course, we'll land the helicopter there, and you can experience the last 15-mile flight back to the hospital. I'll take the car, pick you up at the hospital, and go home. Well, that's the way we had planned it. He brought the helicopter down on the practice range. My wife came out of the little clubhouse and got in the helicopter. I got out, got in the car, and started to head for town. I watched him going down the practice range, and he was going this way, about 15 feet off the ground, and then he went straight up over the tree line and away. Later, I asked her what